Hello and welcome to AccrediTalk. My name is Tom Goddard. Today I'm going to talk about RM1-1 from URAC's Mail Service and Specialty Pharmacy Accreditation Standards version 4.0. The essential thing to know about this standard is that it's the old Core 4 standard repackaged only slightly. So there are basically three major things you need to think about. First of all, you got to know what laws apply to your organization. You've got to have a formal system to track all of the laws and regulations, whether state or federal, whether they be licensing or HIPAA or local laws that apply to your organization. And that might be a tracking sheet, it might be a piece of software like Compliance 360, but you've got to track all of them in a comprehensive way. Second major thing is that you've got to have systems to make sure that your staff and your vendors, your contractors, are obeying those laws that you've already identified in step 1. And you'll do that through a formal system of auditing and monitoring mechanisms. You get to design them, but you've got to have a formal system, and that system needs to be documented both in your policies and procedures and in your implementation documentation. You can integrate that with the spreadsheet that you've done for step 1. Like you might say, well, for HIPAA, here are the privacy laws we need to do, and then here's how we're going to conduct audits and monitoring activities in connection with that law. But you've got to be sure that it's both in your policy and that you have documentation that you've done it. And your policy needs to be clear about the frequency with which you're doing that auditing and monitoring mechanism. And finally, the third mechanism is when you find out, through whatever means you find out, that you are out of compliance with the laws that you're required to operate under, you have an effective and prompt mechanism that both contains and constrains the impact of that compliance failing or issue, but also create a corrective action plan looking forward. How can we avoid having this ever happen again? What changes in our systems or our training do we need to do so that this doesn't happen anymore? The only other piece of this standard that you need to think about is that you've got to have a clearly identified person on your staff, identified both in policy and in job description, to serve as your compliance officer. So you got those three major issues plus a compliance officer. Make sure you have a system to know what laws apply to you, have a system for auditing and monitoring to make sure that you and your contractors comply with those laws, and then finally that you have an effective mechanism for responding to non-compliance events that includes establishing a corrective action plan for each such event so that it doesn't happen again. And then you have to have a compliance officer overseeing this whole mechanism. Thank you for joining me at AccrediTalk.